Joining us right now, GOP political strategist. Also, he's the host of the Mac on Politics podcast. It's Matt Mackowiak. Hey, Matt, how are you?
I'm doing great, Chad. Good morning.
Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it. Let's start off looking at the state of Texas. We've got a special session that will come up on July 18th, and there's a lot of finger pointing about who's to blame over all this. The governor, he's taken a lot of heat, at least I would say the last few weeks. Some would maybe say the last couple of months, where he hasn't been as involved as some would like to see him be involved. When he was on my show last week, he said he was working a lot behind the scenes in the last few weeks of the session, and now he's pointing fingers at the House, saying the House's priorities were not in line with his priorities, and the lieutenant governor is sort of echoing that. The House, they would say, well, hey, we voted out most of what you wanted us to vote out. How does this impact the special session, the finger pointing and all the behind the scenes pushing back and forth?
Yeah, I mean, I almost don't even know where to begin there. I mean, there's so much to so many different areas to go into. I think that the governor got his emergency items, and he obviously was very satisfied with that. But because the sunset bill, as it related to the Texas Medical Board, I think, and 4 other boards and agencies didn't get through, it forced the governor's hand as it related to a special session. And so he wanted to take advantage of that opportunity to try to put as much conservative legislation on the call as possible. And almost everything he put on the call got through the Senate. A lot of it got through both houses, but they couldn't get the 2 bills reconciled. So there is an opportunity for them to get a lot done. 30 days is obviously not enough time to pass bills on 19 separate issues, probably. But they do have 6 weeks from the time he called the special session until the special session begins. So that's actually a 10-week period. So the question is whether members of the legislature are going to come to the special session, with ready to get work done, or are they going to come to the special session frustrated that they have one at all, and not interested in the House giving the Senate a win or the Senate giving the House a win, right? And that is honestly, it has a lot less to do with the governor than it does to do with the acrimony that exists between the House and the Senate. And honestly, the bodies are just pretty far apart. The House is really more of a mainstream, more establishment-aligned body in terms of their priorities and the issues they want to focus on. The Senate is much more of a grassroots and conservative body, and that's just the case. I do think the governor is correct in saying that he was doing a lot behind the scenes. I do think that's true. Certainly there were some members that wish he'd been more engaged, perhaps, and had been more clear about what he had to have in order to avoid a special session. But again, he was not going to list those issues because those issues probably weren't going to cause a special session. It was the sunset bill that did that, and that's a technical bill. So to me, the story here is the House and the Senate and the gulf that exists between them, much more so than the governor directly. He's taken advantage of this opportunity to see how much conservative legislation they get done in special session, and I think most conservatives are excited to see the list of issues that he put on the call.
Were you surprised by the amount of issues?
I was. I'd heard it was going to be a long list a day or so before, and I thought that meant like 5 or 6 things. 19 things is obviously really, really long. Now, I think they're going to try to package some of these things together. Some of these issues, some of the education issues, they could package together into one bill. Some of the local control regulations, they could package together into one bill, perhaps. So there's some opportunities there. But look, I think even if they only get 5 or 7 or 10 of the bills, I mean, it'd be a pretty conservative success, and that would be something that a lot of people could go out and campaign on as we have primaries next March and elections across the state, next November. So there's a real opportunity for them to get a lot done. And my hope is that they're going to come in here to the special session starting July 18th with that mindset. I don't know that I have a ton of confidence. I think the House is really going to be the body to watch. Are they just going to pass the sunset and adjourn, or are they going to try to? Are they interested in trying to pass a school finance bill? And if so, are they willing to give perhaps on school choice for special special ed kids. So there's some opportunities there. We'll see what happens. But all eyes really need to be on the House. The House is I think been more interested in slowing down these bills and playing games with the calendar. While the Senate, it really moved a lot of bills, a lot of conservative bills through the legislature this legislative session.
Matt, I'd like to get your opinion on this argument, and it's been going on since the beginning of the session. Local control versus the state taking over local control, and the governor brought up as part of the special session what people can do with their trees on their own property. There are some cities that will come in and say you can't cut down a tree on your own property unless you get this permit and replace it with this type of tree. Other cities don't have that. You've got cities like Lubbock who come in and say, hey, wait a minute, we're getting caught up with what we're trying to do. We're getting caught up in this whole, we understand Dallas and Austin, and they might be a little far to the left, and, they may be doing some things, but we're getting our local control taken over. Mm-hmm. Where is this argument? Where does the line drawn between local control and what the state can dictate?
It's a great question, and honestly, the line, moves over time. I didn't have a big problem with taking over control of ride sharing because ride sharing is not a local issue. I mean, you get a ride from the airport in Austin to, one of the suburbs, you can get a ride from the airport, you can get a ride, to the airport from your suburb, but not home. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so, I think, Texans are pretty mobile. We're in our cars, we're driving around. It's absurd that an individual Texan would think, I've got to know what the rules are in every little community so I know that I'm doing something that's reasonable. That's part of the reason why I think he signed the texting while driving ban, which some conservatives may not have loved. But, who knows what city you can and can't, text in legally while you're driving. I mean, so to me, the standard that I would put forward is anything that harms the economy or anything that harms public safety. I think you can look at, right? Sanctuary cities, I think, is a public safety issue. The ride sharing issue is a public safety issue. The ridiculous fracking bans that some of these college towns were looking at was impacting royalty owners and was impacting the economy. I actually very much agree with the thought that the governor's putting forward on this tree thing. We just bought a new house in northwest Austin and have some old trees that go over our house, and during a bad storm, I sometimes worry, is something going to happen? What do I have to do to take a branch down? Do I have to call an arborist and have them come out? I mean, I don't know, but
knowing Austin, you're going to have like tons of research done on that tree.
Right.
Did something special happen at that tree? Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think the governor just really wants. It feels like these cities are getting out of control.
Yeah,
and I think if you live in one of those cities, a lot of people feel that way. But whether that's actually going to get done or not, I don't know. I mean, my guess is that that's a lower priority issue, perhaps, than some of these other things. Property tax, the Privacy Act, some of the education issues. It's a great opportunity to make the state stop collecting union dues, which they shouldn't be doing in the first place. I mean, there's a lot of things there on the special call I think are going to get more attention. But yeah, the question of local control is a good one. I wrote a column for the Statesman about that 6 months ago, and I generally think public safety and economic issues are state issues, and they should be seen that way, particularly if cities are doing things that impact those two areas. That's kind of where I would draw the line, but to look at these things on a case-by-case basis, I think.
Let's see, real quick, let's take a look at the national scene. What did you think about the Comey testimony, and what impact will it have on the administration moving forward? Yeah,
I mean, I don't think it was a clear victory for either side, and I wrote about this for the New York Observer right after the hearing. But because it was not a home run for those that are opposing Trump and really want to see him impeached, I thought that was pretty close to a loss for their side. I think they were really expecting Comey to offer something that was going to be totally disqualifying for President Trump, and you just didn't see that. There are going to be questions about whether his comments to Director Comey about, quote, hoping that he could see his way to ending or letting go of the Flynn investigation. There are going to be questions about whether that meets the legal definition, the statutory definition of obstruction of justice, and that debate is going to go forward. Based on the legal analysis I've seen, I don't think it meets that standard. There's no corruption involved. It wasn't an order So, Alan Dershowitz and Jonathan Turley, two of our nation's leading liberal law experts, both don't believe it meets the standard. But ultimately, look, it's going to be up to Robert Mueller, the special counsel, who's overseeing this probe and is hiring people and looking at different angles. So, there's still a lot of uncertainty there, but I think the Trump team has to look at the Comey hearing and look at it and breathe a sigh of relief at this point, now behind them. And it's not clear what the next big moment is going to be. But, I did think Comey undermined himself on a number of occasions in that hearing. Didn't explain why, if this was such a bothersome and worrying thing that Trump said to him, he didn't mention it to anyone. He didn't explain why he leaked his own memo to the press. I mean, he hates leaks when it happens, except when it's good for himself. He didn't explain the situation with Loretta Lynch when she was Attorney General, putting political pressure on him as FBI Director. I mean, why was that not an issue? Why didn't he write a memo about that? Why didn't he leak that memo? I mean, there's just a lot of questions there about his decision making.
Yeah.
I think he's a patriot. I think he's honest. I think he's ethical. But there's a lot of questions again about his decision making, and I thought that in a way the hearing raised more questions to me about Comey and about Loretta Lynch, perhaps. I mean, it did raise some questions about Trump too. I mean, obviously he doesn't think the president's honest. That's not something you want to hear from someone who's the FBI director. That's why he wrote that memo. So there was discouraging things about the hearing for all sides, and I thought it really could have been a home run for those who want to impeach Trump, and that just didn't happen.
Matt, tell folks where they can find your podcast and everything else you have going on.
Thanks. Yeah, we in the latest episode, we have our first United States Senator, Mike Lee from Republican Utah, constitutional expert, great conservative, was our guest. We taped it on Friday. It is available on the iTunes Store, Google Play, Stitcher, and on the web. The podcast is called Mac on Politics, and then we also have our Must-Read Texas morning email that I know you subscribe to that Texans can find at mustreadtexas.com. We put all the news from around the state in place and email it out every weekday morning, Monday through Friday.
Excellent. Matt, as always, appreciate your time. We'll visit with you next week.
Thanks, Chad. Take care.
That's Matt Mackowiak.